So how is Geetanjali different? So Geetanjali before Vikram, Geetanjali after
Big
Vikram.
difference. I wear my seat belt now in the car. Because I've become a lot more fearful. You know, I have become a person who has a very low risk appetite when it comes to a sense of adventure. I feel that I should follow a middle path and not topple over at this stage. Second, I always tie my shoelaces before gym. I never did that. Because every time I went to gym, very often it was the time Vikram was coming in, I was going to gym. And he'd point, he'd say, please tie your shoelaces.
Is it Vikram's, remembering Vikram you died or something else?
No, the fear of tripping and falling and no one there to hold you. You know, I had 40 years of an absolutely outstanding marriage. In every way, there was equality, there was equity, there was partnership, there was love, there was romance, there was responsibility. And even though it was in equal relationship, man-woman, he still was in charge. And it was very nice for me that he was in charge. So I knew that if I could afford to be irreverent about things, he would say, tie your shoelaces, and I'd laugh and it's okay, it's tied, it's fine, yeah. And then, you know, a great bravado, I'd show off and tell nothing will happen to me. I'll jog with this half shoelace on, you see.
With close to 3 decades of experience as a business journalist, I've seen India change, India evolve, India grow. Right from liberalization in the 90s to the rise of tech and IT industry and the startup boom as well. Many say this is India's time. India is today the fastest growing economy in the world. It is also the youngest nation, and there are many things, many areas we have leapfrogged. Think about digital public infrastructure that we built out. One of the largest users of internet in the world, mobile phone users in the world. What I've done as a journalist is connect the dots between economy, business, society. All that I bring in here as part of our podcast, From Code to Culture. With cities in the backdrop, we are trying to understand what's going on in India, uncover different layers that makes India tick. Today, our guest is Geetanjali Kirloskar, Chairperson and Managing Director of Kirloskar Systems Limited. Geetanjali is also a philanthropist, but more importantly, she's been a big champion of India-Japan relationship and the business ties between the two countries. When I first met Geetanjali a while back, she was just dealing with the grief that she dealt with her husband, Vikram, suddenly passing away. And Geetanjali, one of the things that strikes me today as I look at you is how beautifully, with so much resilience, you built yourself from there. What struck you as a tragedy at that point of time? We'll dive into many areas about how you've dealt with many things in your life and career. So why don't we sort of go back to the 90s? And I know that both of us started our careers during that era. India had just opened up.
Right.
And you were in the advertising industry. What was in the advertising industry like? And, you know, I want to sort of remember the media industry I got into. My first job was in 1994. Mm-hmm. I had just graduated, finished my master's. One thing what I realized today is how much serendipity plays a role in shaping your life and your career. So it was 1994. I was about to graduate, finish my master's. I had no idea what I'm going to do. Job market was as it was. It's not about what you wanted. It was about what you got in the job market. I was struggling. I was figuring out. I was doing my master's in history. And it was the last day of submitting an application to Times Center for Media Studies. Okay, I had no idea what journalism was. But I just saw a bunch of friends filling up the forms and submitting. And I said, what are you guys doing? They said, today's the last day, we are filling up. I said, okay, I just typed my resume there, sent it. I did not hear anything from there, okay? So I just looked up there, this is telephone era, landline era. You have telephone directory. We pull out the number. I called the director. You know what? I applied for this course and I haven't got no reply. Yeah. Is there an update that you have for me? So he just looked up and he said, okay, why don't you come and see me? And I went and I saw him. And he interviewed me and he said, okay, If one more board member agrees, then you are through. And I met the other board member. I got through. In 3 months, I was working with Economic Times. Okay? I mean, till January, I didn't know what I'm going to do. By May, I was working in journalism. And that's what serendipity is. And repeatedly, serendipity has played so many times a big role in how my life and career is shaped. What was it like for you at that time?
So I started in advertising a little before you did in the media world. I started in 1987. I married in 83. I started working. It was Pratibha Advertising, for all those who know me from the advertising industry. And it was an agency that belonged to the Kirloskar group. Now, interestingly, it specialized in industrial product advertising because Kirloskar was an engineering group. And when I started working in there, I realized that that consumerism was just coming in. Liberalization happened more in the 90s, and the businesses were getting a little more competitive. So I realized towards 1991, 92, that we need to transform the advertising company from an industrial product advertising agency to a consumer brand building company. And that is when we started hiring people. We got a CEO from a very large consumer advertising agency. And then towards the end of the 90s, I think in the year 2000, we did a joint venture for Pratibha with Lintas Worldwide. And the new company was called Lintas Worldwide, yeah. And we became a part of what was then the Interpublic Worldwide Group, IPG, based in New York. We also reported into the Singapore office. The new joint venture company between Kirloskar and Lintas was called Quadrant Communications Private Limited. And by then, I had about 14, 15 years already of advertising experience behind me. The consumer brand advertising market was booming. It was coming into its own.
Which were the biggest companies at that point of time who were putting in ad money?
You mean the consumer brands? Hindustan Levers came in a huge way. Bajaj Auto came out with its Hamara Bajaj campaign. So, even non-FMCG products, durables, tires, automobiles, two-wheelers like Bajaj Auto, they started coming into the brand advertising.
And what was the sense and sensibilities at that time as compared to today's advertising?
Oh my God, it was completely different. I'm trying to remember. When we made presentations in a pitch to a client, we had a carousel with slides. And then we'd project the slides and go cut, cut, cut. And it was slow and it wasn't tech, And today, it's you just get onto a laptop and you project your presentation. You can make modifications and changes. You can introduce visuals as you're speaking. You can there's use of animation. Gradually, you're going to have artificial intelligence.
And a lot of newspaper ads versus the TV?
Yes. So at that time, it was highly print driven. Later, in the 20s, after the year 2000, we moved a lot to television. So suddenly, the creative professionals who were working with print medium advertising were not very proficient with television advertising. So slowly, a whole new breed of creative professionals started coming in who could do TV commercials. And then production houses sprouted up. Almost everything was Bombay-centric at that time. There was very little.
Based in Bangalore at that point of time would have been
it was
an
hard.
outlier, right?
It was very hard.
It
was very hard. I was married here. I had a little child. So it was hard because even my advertising company, Quadrant, was headquartered in Bombay. There were some advertising agencies you found headquartered in Chennai and Bangalore, but almost all the big ones, and Lintas was in Bombay. And we leaned on Lintas a lot for support. So they were very keen that our headquarters as such should be Bombay whilst I was based here. But there was a lot of travel, Malini. You have to have that flexibility. And then this whole concept of media buying started coming in the latter part of my career.
This is the 90s?
Yes, late 90s. It was 90s. Almost 2000 and moving to the middle of 2000.
But before you go there, one thing that struck me in the 90s when I was in the media industry is gender ratio was still very good. A lot of women there in media. They were not there, the editors, the senior management, right? But if you looked at the numbers, women were still there, which was not the case across corporate India. What was it like for advertising industry?
In fact, all the large media houses were run by women. You had Lynn D'Souza, who ran the Lintas Media House. You had Rhoda Mehta, and you had Kate. There was, I forget her name, Gupte, her surname was Gupte, for Hindustan Thompson.
So advertising industry also had many women.
Yes, they had many women, especially not in the creative. In fact, it was much more in the media buying houses. Large media buying houses came. As advertising budgets grew in conventional media, the companies or the spenders or the clients wanted to optimize the value of every rupee spent. And therefore, media buying houses came where, media was bought in bulk and the cost per square centimeter was lower. You bought in bulk. And they also did a lot of media planning to be able to optimize and leverage the value of every rupee spent because budgets were getting larger. And these media houses, which had a lot of science in it, it wasn't just instinct, but a lot of scientific planning, were all headed by women.
In many ways, media and ad industry was different as compared to many other sectors, like automobile, right?
Yeah,
which is totally male-dominated.
Yeah. No, you did have Suleja Firodia running the two-wheeler company, but that was rare. You also had Malika Srinivasan for Taffy, which is a tractor company in the south and one of the biggest. So there were women coming in. Actually, I don't know what the numbers show, but I strongly believe that India's always had very strong women power in every field, including corporate. Our banking industry is characterized by women for the last 20-25 years. And all the well-known bankers have been women.
What I would say, Geetanjali, if you look at the numbers...
it's still very low, I know.
It's still very low, and especially in the senior management. In fact, what is... unfortunate is that India's workforce participation rate for women has come down.
Yes.
So in some ways it reminds me of Japan, but we'll come to that later. But women in workforce, women in the leadership positions has been a challenge for India, and not just India, even in the US, for example. It's not been startup tech world. It's so male dominated. Is that changing, Geetanjali?
I don't know. It's changing only if you have a very enabling spouse and if you have an enabling family environment. But in the middle class, it is slowly changing. I remember at one time, my boss in advertising, he said, look at the matrimonial columns of the Times of India and do an analysis. And 5 years ago, he said there'd be, you'd want women who are good housewives or they're graduates, but they sort of adjust to the house. Caste and community was very critical. And suddenly he says, now, if you look at it, they want MTech, MCom, engineer, doctor, and they want a working girl. It's not so much about her aesthetic or her community. It's also equally about her education, because in the middle class, they realize, or in the lower middle classes attempting to get into the middle class bracket, they realize that a dual income family will help.
Yeah.
There's a lot of financial demands now. It's not that simple. If you want to improve the quality of your life, you want to give your children a higher education, you want high quality medical care, you want international travel for exposure and education or for tourism, then you must have another stream of income. You must have an added revenue stream in the family. So that will change things a bit. But, there are a lot of other things, Malini. You look at public transport. It's not that easy for a woman to work overtime and get home. And you're reading about it every day.
Yes.
Every day.
So as we talk about this, Geetanjali, I wanted also us to go back to the advertising industry and media industry. Both are undergoing significant
change,
dramatic shifts, tectonic shifts actually, because of technology and because of consumption and everything. How has advertising industry changed? And as you dive into that, let me just take you through what's going on in media industry. Barely anybody reads newspaper, right? We are consuming all our sort of media online, virtual. Media organizations haven't figured out how to monetize it, how to make money on it. Revenues are shifting. Advertising revenues are shifting to digital, but newspapers don't know how to monetize it. It's a story across the world. Tell us about 3-4 big shifts that has happened in the ad industry.
I think one shift that's happened is the budgets have become constrained. In earlier days, when media planners or in the ad agency, we had a very standard percentage of total. There was a percentage of total revenue or profit that would go into advertising. And it was very simple to plan. It was just conventional media. It was print. Then it became print versus TV. Then it became print, TV, and relevant outdoors. And all of them were very expensive. The cost per square centimeter was very high, or the cost per 10 seconds was very high. In fact, I think we are one of the heaviest television advertisers in the world. I don't know how many minutes to
today.
Probably 20 minutes to a clock hour, or even, I don't know. It's very high in this day. So one big shift, of course, has been that there's a proliferation of media. So you had a lot more options as time went on. I think second huge shift that's happened, and it's no brainer, is digital. 47% almost of spend or media planning now includes digital, and that's huge. And the reason is that it's much easier. The consumer is getting more digital savvy his consumption. So you're also looking at the quality of the consumer's ability to grab a message. It's more digital. So that's a major shift. The balance between text, heavy text, the attention span of the consumer when he's consuming media for your advertising message today is much less. So the consumer is much happier looking at an audio video at a location of his convenience, not necessarily in front of a television or sitting with a newspaper, like you said, but anywhere. I mean, he's traveling by bus. Now, some of the airlines have Wi-Fi, so you can check it out there. And
shelf life of ads have gone down dramatically.
It will go down because you want newness in your messaging. You want newness in the audio-visual content. You want to be interactive. You want to be able to comment. You want to be able to like. You want to be able to give a feedback. You want to have a conversation with your advertising. It can't be a static medium in a static location. It comes and it goes. No, it has to be something that stays with you, that builds in you. It has to have a response device. So a lot of direct marketing through digital happens now. I was just reading the other day that the Federation of Automotive Dealers Association, in partnership with Meta, have developed an entire digital platform where to generate an inquiry from the customer goes online and checks on the Facebook website, he checks the dealer's background, literally has a zoom into the dealer location, into the dealer outlet, and he can see the vehicles, he can experience the vehicles online.
Initiation to end-to-end
absolutely journey. Right from generating the first inquiry to creating a sense of awareness with the customer on what dealer has which kind of brands, how are those brands, he gets a view. But actual purchase, it's observed, happens only when he visits the dealer outlet, when he speaks with the dealer and he interacts, because it's a performance category after all, automobiles, right? So there has to be some sort of a involvement. It's a very high involvement, high ticket purchase as well. So there has to be a level of deeper involvement. So he actually but to get him to the dealer outlet and to get him more or less to decide on which brand he wants, he comes rather predisposed by the time he reaches there. The actual sale happens at the point of purchase. These are some of the major shifts that have happened in advertising. The media has moved to digital. The messaging has to be crisper and shorter because attention spans are much less. There is more audio-visual content where you want to dialogue with the piece of communication rather than receive it as a static medium. You also want to introduce, the advertisers want to introduce a response-generating device in the communication, so it directly links to a measurable response and hopefully sales. The link between advertising and sale is a lot more today than it was in our time.
It was brand building.
It was brand building. You're saying that you want to build. That also is happening now. So it's the quality of execution, the kind of creative that you do builds the brand.
So in two areas, I see big shift. One is if you see the kind of companies who are biggest advertisers. Yeah. In the 90s, 2000s, it were a lot about manufacturing, industrial companies. Today, it's just so much tech companies as well.
Tech and financial services.
Financial services. Yeah. So that landscape of who we're advertising, so a lot of it is services sector today.
Yeah.
Then earlier, which was manufacturing.
Airlines, hospitality.
Yes. If you remember that time, what was office like? What was office environment like? What was office attire like?
See, in advertising, it was always very casual. I don't remember us going to work in very formal collared shirts. If I were to wear Western wear, I didn't necessarily have to have very crisp collared shirts
or
very
so
formal
different than financial sector. I used to pity them.
Yeah, I know they're wearing all their ties and even our board meetings were reasonably casual. I was trying to remember whether the chairman of Lintas really wore a jacket as such. I don't think he did. And we didn't exactly wear sarees for annual meets and strategy meetings and monthly review meetings, etc. It was advertising and cinema, entertainment industry has always been that little casual, colorful.
Same here.
Even in the office environment, there was music. not loud, but there was always some little music playing in some section in the art department, for example, or in the client servicing also, they'd have a little music. The food would be, there'd be hamburgers lying around, there was a lot of fast food culture coming in. It was, I think...
In the 90s,
yeah, it was kind of, in advertising and cinema and television, it was also considered being in with it, because there was that whole Americanization also moving in. Don't forget that in that era, a lot of large US-based advertising agencies opened either shops here or joint ventures or bought out local ad agencies. So there was an Americanization, a kind of influence of the West into India. That was a time when we looked up to the West, when we believed that the whole American culture of fast food and that kind of little slang
McDonald's
language.
came in the 90s.
Yeah.
And when they first came here, I remember going on a tour with McDonald's where they were growing lettuce and those potatoes, right?
Yes.
Those sized potatoes.
Yes. Such a
And burger was a new concept that had come to India. People were still getting used to. And first few years, they were struggling to sell their burgers.
Suited
right?
the ad industry, no? Because you want quick food and you want it out. You just want one item that fulfills you in every way and you want it out. So that culture, it was suited the advertising industry. It suited the film industry. It suited the entertainment industry. Also, 15 years ago, I did my talk show on Times Now, as if you remember. Almost
Tell us a bit about that.
Was I would say, Malini.
How did that happen? How did you go there?
I'll tell you, I enjoy people. One of the reasons I chose advertising as a career is because I enjoy people connect. I love people. I like to understand people. So this trait was observed in me when I met Ornab Goswami. I met him, I don't know, I remember, I think it's some ad club function, or I must have met him. And we got chatting and I was animatedly talking to him about a campaign and about trying to understand the key consumer insight of the consumer. Asked him, what does he think? And then at the end of it, he said, Times Now, I'm the editor now of Times Now. That time, Times Now was just launched. And Times Now was just launched and the distribution wasn't entirely in place. Okay. So obviously the viewership was limited. And he said, can we chat? Would you like to do television? I said, what aspect? He said, a talk show. So I went and met him at the Times Now office. I was in advertising. I was in Bombay a lot. And I spoke to Vikram. I said, what should I do? He said, it depends, because Vikram said, you're very good at emoting. You're very expressive. And it is more or less in line with what you do. It is about understanding the consumer. It's about targeting him and communicating with him, bringing him out. So see how it goes. And then I met Ornab, and Ornab said, it's a talk show. I said, but wouldn't you want a star? Because you need eyeballs and you need TRPs and this, I won't get you. He said, no, actually I don't. Because this show is the first reality show of its kind with a 360-degree set where you'll be talking to normal people on aspects of life that are current social trends. So there was one episode, for example, on homosexuality and lesbianism. There is one on living in relationships. It was a little before its time.
What was it like to do a topic like homosexuality in early 2000s?
Oh my God. I realized at that time that there are so many restrictions. We had two boys who came on the set. So it was, there was one episode, it was a 360-degree set. So there'd be two people and then the camera would move to another two and there'd be cross conversation where they would exchange. And then the last piece of the conversation was with a counselor who talk about what is the current social trend for that particular subject. And it was very interesting. And one episode, we always brought in a celebrity of sorts, either on video or actual, because at Times Now, it was again about increasing eyeballs and also getting a celebrity's perspective. Why not? So that was very interesting. We found the mothers came with them and they were very protective. It was still not out. These were people who had agreed to come on national television. These were people who were reasonably progressive and could come on a public platform. Sure. But the parents were very, very apprehensive and they warned me, don't over ask. Sometimes they said, can you shadow the face so that you can't see the person? Okay. So that was happening.
Let's dive into Japan, Geetanjali. And Japan intrigues me at so many levels. And, when I went to Japan, two things struck me. One was that, for every meeting, there was itinerary minute by minute. 8:52 you arrive here, 8:55 you are here, 8:57 you are there. I just realized that they are minuting every second, every movement, and just so rigorous about structure and process and time. That was one thing that struck me. So those are 2-3 memories of Japan, right? A country so structured, so process-driven, so disciplined. Any work happening on the road, it was like a clockwork, clinical. You didn't realize that such a massive work has happened just an hour back. Everything clean. Tell us, what have you noticed? Especially, what Shinkansen, post-World War II, what they have managed to do.
Yeah.
How they built a country which was so devastated during World War II.
So, India and Japan, as I have seen, have several synergies for the apparently diverse culture and work culture and nature of the people and the geography. There's still many synergies. Both are spiritually vital cultures. Both have more or less the same family format. Both have resurrected themselves, rebuilt themselves. India from centuries of colonization in the last couple of decades, and Japan from the sacrilege of World War II, which is what you just mentioned. So these are some of the synergies that I see. I think what I experienced, our first joint venture with Toyota was in 1995, and it was textile machinery. It wasn't cars. That's also how Toyota worldwide started, as Toyota Textile Machinery. And
this was machinery business.
This was manufacturing, because we are basically, Kirloskars are engineers. Kirloskar is a manufacturing brand right from 3 generations. In fact, we invented the first iron plow, Vikram's great-grandfather. Now, I found in the since 31 years, you're absolutely right. The Japanese have an immense sense of self-discipline. And this is really what has nurtured, enhanced and enabled the country and its people to resurrect itself after, as I said, the sacrilege of World War II. There is also, don't forget, it's not such a complicated city. There isn't as much diversity in Japan as there is in India. It's just you're Japanese. They also don't have too many religious sects. Most of them follow Buddhism, and I don't find too much of there's not a strong religious bias there as such. Now, the sense of discipline is so amazing that in COVID, we had videos and, when news was being covered all over the world, when there was adversity hit the Japanese with COVID, they were quite taken aback because they've not faced a pandemic like this. In India, we still have a lot of illness, and we mentally and psychologically and emotionally in India know how to deal with illnesses and infections and mass, ailments, but they don't. So they obviously were hit much harder. And when there was scarcity of groceries, of masks and of equipment, you found them lining up outside stores, outside clinics and hospitals. It was amazing to see, Malini, that there was no rush to beat the line. There was no rush to push and go. And you knew that when your turn comes, there might be absolutely no bread left. There might not be a single mask or an oxygen concentrator left. And in spite of that, they were still standing in line patiently and quietly, perfect single line. And I even saw that they were sometimes giving their place to a pregnant woman or an elderly, aged person, still helping them to cross the road. And one visual I saw, which was very interesting in recent times, was a young girl helping an older person cross the road. She goes back to the road and she bows to the traffic that she had stopped to thank them. So there is a certain element of courtesy, self-discipline, a structured way of living and behaving that is very characteristic of the Japanese. In my personal opinion, it is that has helped them to resurrect. I realized after my adversity that I've had to structure myself a lot more. What is it I've had to introduce in myself? A greater sense of discipline. And that is very important. That's how they could resurrect. Then that became a way of life. And when Kirloskar did the joint venture with Toyota, 2 or 3 things were synergistic.
But before you go there, I'm just curious. Sitting in Delhi, the entire auto belt is in NCR, right?
Yeah,
Maruti,
at that time.
Honda,
Absolutely.
everybody
and
there.
Successful.
And successful. Yeah. And then you have Pune belt, right? Bangalore, virtually nobody. What was it on your mind?
Very interesting. So my late husband, Vikram, he traveled with the Japanese across states because every state was wooing both Kirloskar and Toyota, and actually they'd want them, right? They're not only big names, but don't forget they're ethical brands. So for governance, you know, every state was very keen that they have brands which are international. Also, it introduces manufacturing into the state. So every state was equally wooing us. And you are right. Everybody wanted that level of standard of manufacturing excellence to be introduced into their states. It enhances consumption, employment, etc. But when I think what we found on a matrix in terms of when we did a competitive analysis, what the Japanese, what Vikram and what all of us found, we found that Bangalore, even 32 years back, had a certain adaptability and ability to synchronize diversity far better than other cities.
Explain that.
You are, a migrant or an expat would typically be a lot more confident and comfortable in a city like Bangalore because it allows diversity. It synchronizes diversity and harmoniously enables it to. There is no parochialism in Bangalore. It isn't that this is typical of Bangalore. It isn't. And this is also due to the IT revolution, because IT brought migrants into Bangalore, right? People from different cultures, people from different backgrounds, people who were outsourcing IT globally. So the international community also visited, they stayed here. So already there was the beginnings, very, very beginning of an international culture, number one. Number two, it was green. It was far greener than Delhi. So there was diversity in terms of ecosystem, there was diversity in terms of culture and people, a natural ability to synchronize different cultures, different mindsets, different levels of intellect, different communities. So that they found very interesting. And it was still not a fully grown city. It was still evolving. It was still evolving. It was still a growing city.
So if you compare that, stack that up with, say, Bombay at that time, and when you say it was not a big city, what would that mean?
You see, also, you have to see that our kind of manufacturing plants require about 300-400 acres of land.
Right.
And it needs to have like a sort of an industrial park kind of a concept. So perhaps at that time, I don't think Bombay had it. Even today, it doesn't. But it has very well developed regions of industrial parks that have come up in recent times. So Bidadi was very appropriate, and the government was willing to put in the kind of infrastructure that was needed and give us that support. So they found that. And it's very interesting, Malini, when we were bringing them here and we kind of decided, we also found a lot of opportunity to develop a Japanese restaurant.
So there is a chapter called the Land of Globetrotters, right? This city has attracted many expats and across this board, right? And there's a section that we dive deeply into Japan to understand how that slice has kind of evolved. So in 1996, there were very few Japanese companies in Bengaluru. Visas were issued out of Chennai back then, and Bengaluru had less than 100 Japanese expats. In those days, Japanese expats in Bengaluru came here mostly without their families and would typically live close to one another and socialize within their own community. Over time, things have changed. Today, Bengaluru has 136 Japanese companies, over 1,000 Japanese expats, the highest number of Japanese nationals outside of Delhi.
That's right.
Japanese food has become popular and mainstream in the city, with Bangaloreans developing a taste for it. Which was that restaurant, Dahlia, right?
Dahlia, that's
Dahlia
right. Dahlia was the restaurant.
The only Japanese restaurant in the 90s.
And if I'm not mistaken, it was supported by some of the Japanese companies, including
And today, Japanese cuisine has become one of the most popular cuisine in the city. So working with the Japanese Toyota, what have you learned about Japan, and what does it take to make this joint venture? Because this is one of the most successful joint venture in the country, right? So what does it take to work with the Japanese? What have you learned about Japanese way of doing business?
Now, there are two aspects to this question. One is what makes a joint venture work specifically with the Japanese, and what is unique to Japanese work culture that we were able to work with somehow, because work culture wise, there's a lot of disparity between the Indian way and I'll tell you. Now, for coming to the joint venture, Malini, Vikram always said that in any joint venture, specifically with the Japanese, you must know your boundaries. One of very simple reasons why we've succeeded. I'm not going to sit here and say we succeeded because each one brought in a lot of strategic insight and drive and entrepreneurial energy and success. And, that is there. Without that, you don't have a business. But basically, what makes a joint venture stay and sustain over periods of time is that you must know the boundaries and you have to work without an ego. You are in a partnership business model, and you must never forget that. Third is never compromise on governance. Because if one partner sees a kind of lack of ethic in the other partner, it breaks immediately. And I've seen many joint ventures break on that. So 4 guiding values that both Vikram and I learned. I learned it from Vikram. I can't take credit for it because I really learned. It was his journey. He was leading it. I was merely following. But Mansi and I learned this from Vikram through observation and experience of working with them. 4 values. One is humility. You always have to, it's not the I factor, is if they sense too much of an I factor, if they sense that you're walking in front of the camera, trying to cover somebody else and come as the main, it makes them uncomfortable. Second is build trust. And 1, 2, 3 is not in this order of priority. All 4 are important.
Sure.
Building trust is very important with the Japanese. You have to build trust, and it takes a huge amount of time. It's not about 2 dinners and 5 meetings that you've sold yourself. That's why they take time, because beyond the business plan, they need to see that they can work with you with trust. And they need that a lot. And that's what makes the joint venture take through time. Third is respect. They institutionalize respect. It's part of every aspect of their working with you. Respect includes courtesy, respect includes manners, respect includes respect and regard for public space, public community behavior. It includes a lot. Last is patience. That you know. You need to have a lot of patience with them in a very positive way. When we set up Sakra World Hospital in, I think, 2010, it was the only, and by the way, it was the first India-Japan hospital in India was in Bangalore. This is the first hospital that brings in a joint venture between Kirloskar Systems, Toyota Susho Corporation Japan, and Secom Japan. So tripartite. And it brought in the best of Japanese healthcare practices, medical protocols, way of running a hospital design elements into India, and that is in Bangalore. And it's still doing very well. It's right way in Whitefield, and it's doing extremely well.
You were talking about the patients bit there.
Yeah. So the patients, when we set up the hospital project, it appears to move a bit slowly in the beginning, because what the Japanese tend to do is they spend a lot of time on planning. They don't rush into execution.
Yes.
And they look at every little risk, especially a company like Secom Hospitals and Toyota Susho. They look at every single risk. Planned risk, unplanned risk, possible risk. Of course, COVID, there was no risk analysis, but every aspect of risk, they factor it in, and they take time because they don't want to forget everything. They have risk mitigation plans in place, and it's when they've perfected the plan, then they move into execution. But you know what I found, Malini? I found the execution took half the time. So from start to end, it didn't actually take that much time. We were able to put up a hospital and do the first procedure 18 months from the date of excavation for a 300-bed tertiary care hospital with 14 state-of-the-art operating theatres. And all other competing hospitals told me that this design and model will take minimum 3 years. You have to be prepared.
You know what occurs to me when I look at India and Japan? There are 2, 3 things that occur to me. There's such a massive complementarity between the two nations. One is an old country. You go to Japan, you don't see children. This is the world's youngest country. So world's oldest country, or one of the oldest country, and world's youngest country. Here is a country that plans. And we are a country, we just
do.
And it has its advantages. I mean, in this very entrepreneurial,
absolutely,
very startup-ish, what some people call jugaad, but
able to
our way of doing things, right?
Adversity.
And in many ways, these two countries, if they're able to come together, they probably can do fantastic. You know, we have a large market to address. Japan has a small market, but they're fantastic in manufacturing. We are not good at manufacturing. We are getting better. We are great at services industry. So, I mean, there is enormous complementarity. Geetanjali, there is this anecdote how Toyota Kirloskar venture in 1997 sort of came into being.
Okay, not an anecdote for the actual thing, but I think Vikram as a person was somebody the Japanese deeply respected, and they had very great regard for him because, as I mentioned earlier, he was a man who genuinely believed that in a partnership you have to be devoid of ego. It always has to be about the company and not about the person, number one. And number two, you have to always respect the boundaries. Having said that, at a more personal level, they also seem to have loved him as a person. In fact, for a long time, people said the joint venture was not with Kirloskar as much as it was with Vikram Kirloskar, And I think one of the observations I had, and they also later expressed this to me, is when there was a very important meeting and he was with his other cousins and his uncle. It was the whole family coming forward to sign, to discuss and to finalize the joint venture. There was a photograph being taken. He had done all the work in getting the partnership to this level. Lot of work and passion. It was Vikram who brought Toyota to India end of the day. But at that defining moment, he stepped back and he, sort of asked his uncle and brothers to come ahead. And he stepped back a little bit. many would have wanted the prominence and gone ahead. It's a natural instinct. If you work very hard at something, Malini, and when there is a level of recognition that's about to happen, your first instinct is to go up, right?
Take credit.
Absolutely. Not only, and it's not that you're deliberately taking credit because we have an ego, you want to show off or you want to get. It's just a natural instinct. What was interesting about Vikram is his natural instinct was to step back and allow the rest of the family to come up front and complete the dialogue. And that, in my personal opinion, I could see that it is something that they loved about him. And from then on, I see that in the journey of 30 years across several joint ventures, it didn't stay with one. There's 7 to 8, including hospital, for example, with the group with Japanese. I found that this love stayed. That is where I think they felt that here is a man who can be trusted, because he knows not only when to step forward, he also knows when to step back.
In fact, Japanese culture is never in your face.
No.
Always understated.
It's about the subtleties.
They'll conduct themselves in such a subtle, understated way, never obvious and in your face. And
much to learn.
Absolutely. Geetanjali, we'll go back to 2022 and very different paths I've had and you've had, but 2022 for you was a major sort of inflection point in your personal, professional life. Why don't I sort of trigger this conversation and talk us as women leaders? For me, I used to be a journalist, as I said, and never a CEO, never a founder. I had never led such a large organization, large in the sense of the kind of impact we are making, especially. And then suddenly when you are thrust into this position, and none of the things that we were doing, that I was doing, I had ever done in my life. In 2022, 23 was the year that we launched our festival. There were times that our team was very small, just me and another colleague, but our dreams were very big. What I realized is there were so many things that I had learned over the years about multitasking, about economizing on resources and still not compromising on what you want to achieve. Some of those things came very handy. What about you? What has shaped you as a women leader? And tell me, how do you see yourself distinctive as a woman leader, the traits that shape you as compared to, say, maybe Vikram, how Vikram was leading? Is there something different, something unique, something special about women as leaders?
A lot of the work that I do now and a lot of this journey is in fact very similar to the way Vikram would have done it. Over the years, it was not his style, it became our style, including Mansi. It became an integrated style. And I am very clear that I will take forward his legacy exactly in his way. His culture, his values, his approach, his outlook. But as a woman leader or as a woman in business, also thrust upon a huge network of responsibilities.
Why don't you talk about just that 2022 and within 2 weeks of time, you were to sort of take over the reins?
No. See, what happened was, it was very sudden, right?
Yes.
When it happened, it hits you. It's like your life is shattered into a million pieces. It is bound to happen. Very soon, it was just a few days into the tragedy, I realized that I have to transform my grief into resolve and I have to take charge. Because who else would? I have one daughter. It's not a family business where your husband's brothers, brother-in-laws, father-in-law, my father, my brother. You don't have that sort of a family support because it was not a family business. It's just me and Mansi.
So and you said this is something you had never done in your life.
No, I had never taken charge.
Tell me 1 or 2 things that was giving you nightmare when you looked at the business.
Leading diversity and scale and the complexity that diversity and scale brings right from upfront gave me immense anxiety right up to, say, a few months back. I would get up sharp at 2:33 and I found some research where it said that when you wake up with anxiety, it's normally between 2 and 3. And that's when I knew, because bang on 2:30, I used to get up with a kind of a panic attack. I wondered whether what I spoke, did I speak right? What if I appear suddenly to be over-aggressive? Because you can't do that either. And as a woman, generally in society, you have to be very, very careful not to appear as over-aggressive. You're supposed to be grieving. And here you are out there on the field battling, trying to get things in place, trying to take over things from Vikram, trying to sort of integrate your daughter into the partnerships, because she was my nominee on all the boards thereafter. Toyota also appointed her as their nominee on the main company in Vikram's place. I was looking after the holding company as chairman managing director. So there were a lot, and I came on to a lot of think tanks. I came on to the National Council of CII. I took over a lot of other platforms that he was working on, which influence policy. So the scale and the diversity and the complexity leading from the front, and as a woman, really I had a lot of fear at that point at night. By the morning, I had the ability to gather myself, but that's my own internal resilience. As I said, I transformed my grief into resolve and I went ahead with it. That really, see, when Vikram was there, I was also working. And 15 years back, I joined Vikram at Kirloskar Systems in the family business. That's how I started working with Japanese on smaller joint ventures in the last 15 years, like Sakra and also Toyota Susho insurance broker. So they already knew me. But it was very different, Malini, doing this from behind Vikram. And especially, he was larger than life. He was a brilliant man. And then you come in front, right?
So how is Geetanjali different? So Geetanjali before Vikram, Geetanjali after
Big
Vikram.
Difference.
Tell me 3-4 things
Big
in which Geetanjali is.
I'll tell you, very different. I wear my seat belt now in the car. Even if I'm going right up to the Manipal hospital, which is a few yards away, the first thing I do in a sit, I wear my seat belt.
What is it?
Why? Because I've become a lot more, how should I say, fearful. I've become a lot more, I have become a person who has a very low risk appetite when it comes to a sense of adventure. I feel that I should follow a middle path and not topple over at this stage. Maybe later I'll go back to. So I wear the seat belt. That's the first thing. Second, I always tie my shoelaces before gym. I never did that. Because every time I went to gym, very often it was a time Vikram was coming in, I was going to gym. It was at home. And he'd point, he said, please tie your shoelaces.
Is it Vikram's, remembering Vikram you tie it or something else?
No, the fear of tripping and falling and no one there to hold you. You see, now you're on your own. It's all about you. There's no one watching. And Vikram was I had 40 years of an absolutely outstanding marriage. In every way, there was equality, there was equity, there was partnership, there was love, there was romance, there was responsibility. And even though it was an equal relationship, man-woman, he still was in charge. And it was very nice for me that he was in charge. So I knew that if I could afford to be irreverent about things, so he would say, tie your shoelaces, and I'd laugh and it's okay, it's tied, it's fine, yeah. And then, a great bravado, I'd show off and tell nothing will happen to me. I'll jog with this half shoelace on, you see. And he'd say, my God, please tie your shoelaces. There was a time when he actually sat me down and said, let me tie it for you. You don't even know how to tie it properly. You're going to trip and fall on your nose. So that is the second thing that I've changed and I do a lot of. I'm much less impulsive. I'm a lot more organized. I talk much less now. I make it a point that when I'm in meetings, because most of them are going to be with an international community, I'm already Consul of Finland as well. So I make sure that if I'm given 5 minutes, I rehearse and rehearse and rehearse at home. So I finish in less than 5 minutes. I plan everything. I think through everything. I rehearse everything. Every interview, even my interview with you, I wanted to understand what are the kind of questions. I did a little homework. I try leaving nothing to chance now, and that puts a huge amount of back pressure on me. It does. It does put a huge back pressure on you. But this is becoming a way of life. Now, who knows? Maybe my grief, maybe my loss, maybe my adversity has made me into a different person in a way. Of course, the core remains the same. Your resilience, your ability to fight battles, that's all there, right? But maybe it may help me to become the best version of myself.
What about Geetanjali, the leader? You always led different companies, but you are still leading a much larger sort of setup. How has this leader evolved?
This leader is a slightly different leader than earlier, because here I have to show leadership or take leadership with a lot of ownership and accountability, which was not there before. If I'm now discussing a new joint venture, let's say with my partners, in that discussion, I have to take a decision. And I have to demonstrate a sense of confidence in taking that decision. So I have to lead the situation. I have to lead my team to believing or to convince them to build their consensus. I'm all alone doing it. And if whatever happens, whatever is the result of that, I am alone to take ownership of it. I have to bring out the confidence that yes, I am responsible and I'm accountable for the outcome of this decision. I believe in this, we can go ahead with this. Sure. It is not like earlier days where Vikram was there and I was a leader. I have to evolve my own leadership instincts entirely in isolation now. And I have to be responsible for the net result.
So you are learning to swim in deep waters,
Deep waters, right? Alone and learning to survive. You know, there's a very interesting Japanese quote, I think Murakami. He said that when you go through a storm, the person who exits the storm is completely different from the person who enters the storm. And that's what the storm's all about.
Talk about your mom-daughter relationship. Anyway, mom-daughter's relationships are always very special. Yes. How is that relationship evolving, changing? So
I became a single parent to an only child. That is also very hard. Now, in the relationship with my daughter also, Malini, it was very interesting. She had seen me as a mother. She'd seen me as a business leader, but always behind a very powerful male leader. She had an enormously bonded relationship with the father. I had to even build my confidence levels with my daughter. I had to inspire her to believing that I could do it. I could replace Vikram in many areas as possible and provide that protective shield as a parent. Yes. So it wasn't that you slip into these roles, because when adversity hits you, everyone's reactions are different. There is self-doubt, there is fear, there is uncertainty, there is insecurity. So even as a single parent, you have to build and you have to show leadership even in your mother-daughter relationship. So it's not just leadership at work. You have to take charge even there. You have to be accountable even there.
Like one area which was completely Vikram's domain and you had to take over, where you were feeling insecure. Talk about that.
When I now discuss, I am the only one discussing it as a partner with the Japanese, right? And there are many of them in the team, and there's just me from here. And I need to inspire confidence and comfort with my daughter that I can deal with that meeting alone, because it's a meeting that's more with me than with her. It may not be required for us to be together in all sessions at all points of time. And so you have to give her that confidence. I have to replay back the meeting to her in a manner that she will understand. I need to convince her of my leadership skills and ability to handle that meeting through actually demonstrating that I can handle it. So it takes a bit of time to build that confidence and comfort. But in 2 years, I think between Mansi and me, we've managed to build a beautiful bond, because end of the day, you are mother-daughter. You know, there is a natural bias to supporting each other, right? Mm-hmm. So that has happened, but we have two people in the business. So there will be conflicts in terms of the way we think sometimes, which is quite different also.
What advice would you give as a woman leader to your daughter, to other women?
You know, I would say always, and this is something not only as a woman, this Vikram also said in most of his interviews and when we discussed, you always need to balance your personal and your ambition. You need to know the inflection point where you will put a cap on your ambitions, because greed can take you nowhere. So how do you balance a quality of life, intellectual and emotional development, the ability to develop relationships and spend time on it, and to manage your home and the network of relationships within? Because my daughter is a mother, she's a wife, she's a daughter. So there has to be a certain level of balance to any woman leader between the home and the work. Because whatever you say, Malini, I still believe that a woman does tend to nurture. She's a creator, right? So you need the mom around. So what you do is you commit yourself to work. You are accountable today. Don't forget, the big responsibility that we both have is that we are accountable to a lot of stakeholders who are depending on the decisions that we make. So we can't falter. We've got to be serious. We have to commit time and energy. But as you move on in life, you have to see how you can balance. And if you have that approach and attitude, you will be able to balance. You will be able to spend time. You will be able to attend your children's sports day and attend the board meeting. You just manage it. It's your management and leadership skill again that's challenged.
You're saying women can have it all if they do the things right.
Yeah, absolutely, if they do the things right. And I think also, it's sad, but it also depends whether your environment is disabling or enabling. Some of us are lucky and some aren't that lucky. The challenges are more. And that's why, to get back to your original discussion, why do women not make it in large numbers to decision-making roles?
Is there an advice you have to the 23-year-old Geetanjali when she started her journey?
Tie your shoelaces, wear your seat belt. Don't have bravado for the sake of it. It's not funny. You can trip and break your face and it can never come back again. And, believe a little more in your destiny. I tell people you can form your own destiny. So when things are going so good for you over a long period of 4 decades, you start believing in your destiny. You believe that you've handled it. You're able to do it. So to the Geetanjali of 23, I say that there is something called destiny. There is fate. There is uncertainty. You can get hit at any point of time. While you need to stay positive in life, while you need to believe in the world and in your life, don't be over-optimistic as well. Because the extent of the shock is much more when you're over-optimistic.
Being lonely and dealing with all these things, what are sort of mechanisms that you've figured that works, that helps you deal with it? Lonely at work, personal, professional, everything, right? And the second is, building a set of sounding boards, mentors, peers with whom you could sort of deliberate on issues, right? Now it's just you. Sometimes your daughter will be there, many times she may not. So first question is about loneliness. How hard is it? And how have you learned to deal with it?
I get asked this question twice a day, either from media or friends and family, even at the workplace. And they don't see that I look lonely, so they wonder what it is, right? I'll tell you, 2-3 things, Malini. Firstly, I'm a workaholic, first of all. So my emotional investment in the work that I do is very high. So that takes care of a lot. And that was there even in my advertising days. In fact, Vikram sometimes used to say, no, where are you? I'm saying something. Are you there? Why is it that in a dinner you're still talking about the campaign or trying to pitch? One of the things I'd love to do at dinners was pitch for a client. I'd say, Vikram, that guy, now what's his net worth and is that his size of his business? And they're doing very well. No? And I just heard him say he's launching a new brand of shoes. So I'd go and sit with them and discuss it, So even then my emotional, intensity in workplace was very high. Second, I am a person who's very multidimensional. So I enjoy sport, I play golf, I have many interests. Second, I'm a people's person. So I have over time, not only both Vikram and I have developed a huge network. We have a golfing group, we have this group, we have that group. So somebody or the other is always lending a shoulder or an ear. Third is, Malini, I've been very lucky. I have a huge family, typical big fat Indian family. So I have about 100 people. And I haven't been alone at home for more than 40 days in the last 2 years. If you look at the total, right now it's a very odd time when there's nobody for 4-5 days. My aunts come for 1 month, then my aunts and uncles come from both sides, then my cousins come. So the house is full. And they make it a point because I told them. They said, what is it that we can do? I said, just keep coming and going. Just come, go. In fact, many of them have been my counselors. So a lot of this, I've actually not felt lonely ever. But what I do feel is the void inside. I do feel a deep sense of emptiness. And I know that you have to learn to live with your grief. So I've not felt, and then of course I have my grandchildren. They call twice a day. I go holidays with my daughter and my grandchildren. So there's a lot happening.
So, there is a time that this loneliness feels loneliness, and then you transition into where it starts, you start enjoying solitude. You call it solitude. And I've gone through that phase, right? There was a time that one felt lonely, and suddenly I realized that you are at a place, you enjoy that solitude. You enjoy that space that you've got to read, to even ruminate on things that you have never had the time to ruminate on.
Malini, you've said something bang on. Because when you said, how has Geetanjali changed? This is very critical. I forgot. Which is, I never enjoyed solitude. And I often had friends and my relatives, in fact, they used to, even then we were always gossiping and chatting. And they said, you can't sit alone. But now I've come to, I wouldn't say I love it. The way I would put it is, I've learned to embrace solitude. I've learned to realize that there is a certain sense of focus that comes with stillness in your life. I've learned to value stillness and to understand it better.
Anything guiding principle that Vikram looked at to do philanthropy?
He said, make a measurable difference and stick to one thing. Don't send checks to 50 different philanthropies and do one thing and then another. See a project and take it through. And finish it and talk less about it. Do it and the work will show. Make a measurable difference. Take one project and see it through till the end.
Sure.
And he always said, philanthropy that goes beyond the wallet, you need to spend a little bit of time and effort to strategize and to improve the quality of the result. And mine was, I came upon something very interesting on my own just before he passed away, which I'm now going to take forward, which is the children of sex workers. And there is a foundation in Pune which I was quite inspired by. Pune, because we have a home there, we belong there. And I am now in the process of talking to them to see how I can involve and engage and take it further. And it's at multiple levels. It's not just, this NGO runs a couple of small hostels in the red light areas where they procure these children at 2 months and 1 month. And the mothers come and feed them and go back. So from that age, they keep the kids. It's of course allied with the government. How to build that, scale that up a little more, and also how to give counseling to some of the children, because when they come in, when they're 9 or 10, they're already affected. And you'll be surprised that boys are more affected. There is a large number of abuse of little boys who are the children of sex workers, even more than the little girls. So that aspect of society has always affected me. And now I think, since I have a lot of emotion to give, I think this might be the right time to engage larger in that.
Now we'll talk about cities, okay? And I know you guys traveled.
Yeah.
Tell us about one city that struck you as probably the most fascinating city, or the city that you have lovely memories of.
You know, I'm going to give a very cliched answer. There was, of course, some fabulous cities like Cordes, you know, which are very historical and a lot of old architecture.
One city.
One city. Can I say Paris?
Please.
Or will it sound too
and
cliched?
What is it? No.
I think what Vikram and I loved about Paris was the sense of sensuality in the air, the sense of art, you know, just the sense of style and art and food. It just came together so perfectly. And you could just walk through the city. We never drove through Paris. We always walked through by the riverfront. You walk into an art gallery. There are museums. There are so many institutions of creative and historical value, and so beautifully maintained. You know, you find every single person in the city has a sensibility for their art and their culture. And it all comes together. The food, we love wine, that came together. Style, fashion, artistic sensibilities, the creative instincts, the creative energy. It's not the kind of digital energy that Bangalore has, or it's not the kind of commercial creative energy. It's just there in their DNA. And so the people, the gentleness, we absolutely loved Paris.
So talk about Bangalore. And today, if you look at the city and its nightlife, its cuisine, how the city has changed. Tell me one or two things that strikes you about the city.
You know, I am still quite amazed with the diversity of food in Bangalore. It's quite amazing. You know, you have farm law, which is a multi-course cuisine inspired from a blend and fusion between fresh South Indian flavors and a little internationalization in the way it's presented and it's cooked and made. And then you have Italian restaurants of great value. And then suddenly you have a Punjab grill. There's a lot of diversity in Bangalore. It's amazing. And at many price points. Huh?
Which was your favorite restaurant?
Sunny's. Before you say it, I'm telling you. Sunny's was this lovely little place. You up a winding wrought iron staircase with a wrought iron table and few chairs, just 10 or 15 right on top. A little bakery at the bottom in this little lane in the center of Bangalore, which wasn't even very well lit. And Vikram and me and little Mansi, that would be the great outing of the week. We're going to Sunny's for dinner. We're going to Sunny's for lunch. The same Greek salad that I had that time with the same dressing is still there at Sunny's. Of course, he's added little Japanese and Asian, as I said. That, I think Sunny's, for me, is part of Bangalore's food culture, but I think it's just part of Bangalore's culture. That's what we remember. And there's a smiling Arjun, and off and on Vivek would be there, and they'd have the cheesecake, the tiramisu still coming down. I mean, some things just don't change. Amazing that quality of food, that internationalization of flavor 30 years back in Bangalore was still much sought after as it is today. That is very interesting.
One of the things that struck me as we were working on our report, VR City report on India's top cities, how Bangalore has, in the last 2-3 decades, has the second largest vehicle population.
And road accidents?
Same.
In the same proportion.
And also because roads here have not sort of grown, evolved, right?
Yeah, urban planning is urban development.
Planning. So that infrastructure.
Yes.
How have you sensed that? Because you are in the automobile industry.
Yeah.
Talk a bit about that.
So, as we know that India ranks 6th in the volume of automobiles, but first in road accidents. India. So that's first or second. So that's the proportion. I don't know Bangalore, because Bangalore, as you said, has a very large percentage of the total automobile See, because Bangalore's middle class has evolved, and the upwardly mobile middle class has evolved and developed very rapidly and large volume as compared to probably many metros of the city. Also, again, IT revolution, multinationals, expats, etc. The per capita income may be much higher. It has an upwardly mobile middle class, and as a result, the vehicle population is high here. It's probably grown very, very high.
What you are missing is the public transport and
so what we don't to parallel with that, you don't have sufficiently well connected, secure and comfortable public transport. But we are hopeful, and that is causing a problem. It's congesting the city. One of the things one of the ministers of Karnataka spoke at the Global Investors Meet the other day was that it is important to create more Bangalores, satellite towns, go into northern Karnataka, develop other regions, so you decongest Bangalore. So that will be an answer, because if you second, the urban-rural divide, you'll be interested to know, in Karnataka has narrowed substantially, and it's higher than the national average. The narrowing of the divide is higher. So that is a very good thing, because it means if there is higher rural productivity in Karnataka, you will have less migrant employment coming into Bangalore and staying here. Hopefully the tier 2, tier 3 and semi-rural areas will have their own productivity levels, own economics and growth, so that people find employment over there.
Sure.
And that will help your whole congestion. But the road situation, we're just hoping it improves.
Okay, we are going to dive into rapid fire.
Oh God. Yeah.
Best Japanese restaurant in India?
Harima. It is.
Okay. Where is it?
Devata Plaza on top. It's very authentic. Okay. And the atmosphere is very authentic. The tatami room also there. And it has vegetarian.
Best Indian food in Japan that you get?
You know, in Tokyo, there is I don't remember the place, but there's a dosa place which I love. And there's an Indian restaurant. But you know, to be very honest, I don't eat Indian food when I go to Japan. You do get excellent Indian food, because in the large cities like Tokyo, unless you're quality competitive, you won't survive.
Weirdest food you've ever had?
My God. Well, also in Japan, to be quite honest, because I went to this restaurant, multi-course, and you could tell the chef. I read on the website, any allergies, we are happy to accommodate. I said, this is the fine dining for me tonight. I'm going to treat myself. And there were 4 courses of mushroom. So out of the 8 courses, 4 were mushroom in different forms, and 2 were seaweed and 2 were tofu. So I think as a meal, it was very weird for me. It was flavorful, it was interesting, very high quality, but it was weird.
So we digress. I'm going to ask the next question. One Japanese phrase everyone should know before traveling to Japan.
Domo arigato gozaimasu.
What does that mean?
Thank you very much.
What's your biggest superstition?
Attention, praise, nazar. That I'm very superstitious about. I really, if somebody goes on and on that, praising me for a certain period of time, I get very uncomfortable. And after Vikram, one of the things, I tend, my palpitation levels are much higher. So things freak me out much more.
Okay.
So, nazar for me.
Okay, it's a question, somebody. What's your skincare routine?
My skincare routine is very basic. I hardly apply anything on my face, but interestingly, freshly made coconut oil at home, and Shishido is the Japanese cosmetic that I use. There's also Haichi, a honey-based Japanese soap, which I use for my skincare. But that's about it, nothing else.
Your one-stop shopping destination?
One-stop shopping destination would be when I travel abroad, mostly New York. I go to one department store and I finish for the year.
Your most ridiculous purchase that you've had?
We were at Capri and we walked into a shop And I love corals. So they had this most beautiful coral necklace. It was horrendously expensive. I got a feeling that we are being kind of cheated because, and that's very typical in that area. We were very excited. I've never worn it because when I came back, it just pulls my neck down. It's so heavy and it's so badly made that it tends to pull my neck down.
How much did you spend on it?
No, I'm not going to share that. But it was a huge amount. Huh? It was almost like buying precious stones.
If you were offered a role to act today in film, how quickly would you say yes?
Yes. I'd love to. I love acting. That's the one thing I couldn't do.
But you did one movie.
I did 2 films. I did Samay with Sushmita Sen and I did Chelavi with Girish Karnad. And that was beautiful. But movies, I would always love to have an opportunity. It's going to be difficult, but I'd love to.
Thank you, Geetanjali.
Thank
it was
you.
lovely to sort of speak to you, get a sense of your journey.